Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have so much fun today. One of the things that I do, obviously, before I talk with any of my guests, is I look at their LinkedIn profiles. And this person I'm just lifting a part of his LinkedIn profile out to do part of his introduction because I just loved it. I thought it was great. So, if change is causing your staff grief, frustration, baldness, or acne, today's guest can help. After all, nobody likes change done unto them. Everybody likes change they do unto others. And Larry Mandelberg certainly knows how to flip that script. So, Larry, welcome to our program.
Deb, what a joy it is to be with you.
I love it. We're going to have so much fun. And of course, I also discovered in reading Larry's LinkedIn profile that he is a fellow CU buff. So woohoo, we always love that, right?
Woo!
Yay, go Buffs, go Buffs. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Larry, and then we will jump into this because we're going to have so much to discuss. So Larry Mandelberg is a serial entrepreneur who solves complex business problems. He provides leadership team development, change mentoring, strategic planning, executive coaching, and ethics training to mid-size organizations and their boards through his consulting practice. Larry has launched 4 startups, led a merger, and conducted a successful turnaround. Among his 13 businesses, he's also had the unfortunate pleasure of suffering business suicide firsthand. He is also the author of Businesses Don't Fail, They Commit Suicide. So let's find out more about that. Again, welcome, Larry, to our program.
Deb, it's a joy to be here. I feel honored to be part of your guest lineup.
We are going to have so much fun. And, we're going to be talking about businesses, as we mentioned, businesses that commit suicide, but businesses that fail and why they fail, because I think it's so important for everyone to not be planning for that, but to keep it from happening. So, that's going to be a great discussion, but I always like to ask my guests, how is it that you got to where you are today? So tell us a little bit more about that.
That's always a fun story. We all revel in our backgrounds, and it's great to be able to share some of that. I'm the 5th generation of a family-owned business that started in the 1850s. So my family was the purveyors of pay it forward 170 years ago. And I like to say I have 170 years of history or experience because of that. More closer to today, I was working when I was a child. It wasn't abuse. It was by desire.
And it happens a lot in family businesses.
Absolutely. And my dad used to love to say, this business puts the roof over your head and food on your table. My God, if you're not in school, you're going to be working. And God bless him for that. He taught me a work ethic, and he was one of the greatest people in my life. People that knew him, he's passed away, talk about going to the College of Louis. That was his name. That's how much he was respected. But when I was a child, he had me doing things that most children don't get to do. I was doing all the books at age 13.
Wow.
I was doing sales and marketing at age 14. I was managing a 6-figure stock portfolio at age 15. So I was really given the gift of trust and experience, and experience is a key. It's a key,
right?
Pay attention, people. And one day he said to me, how is it that this was the auto parts business, by the way. And he said, how is it that we went from 0 automobile manufacturers in this country to over 300 and then down to 3 in like 30 years. How do you have
right.
that
How does
many
that happen?
manufacturing companies start and then they almost all fail? He was fascinated by that. Unfortunately, I didn't care, but he did light a fuse. And that fuse, that spark that he used, said, why does any business fail? So I couldn't get that out of my system. And I've spent my entire life from that point forward trying to find the answer to that question. So how I got here today was because I didn't like the business, I left, went to college, decided I wanted to get more experience in more businesses rather than finish college, because I realized college required a level of commitment. And I was young and I liked women and I liked booze. And
you were in Boulder.
I was in Boulder. And I told my dad, I said, listen, I think this is fabulous that you're funding my partying, but this is a waste of your money. I'm going to go to work. And he respected that. I was always very honest with my dad. So I started working for other companies and found that I really wasn't able to do that. When I say working for other companies, I'm talking about 4 days, 8 days. I realized that was not for me. So my dad said, I've always wanted to open a branch in South Lake Tahoe. So why don't you?
That's not a bad place to live.
Not a bad place to live. But I was up in Oregon, actually. I was up in Portland. And I went down there and they were suffering from a drought. And there were 23 auto parts stores around the lake. And almost every one of them were going bankrupt. And I said, this doesn't work.
No.
So I went back up to Portland, started looking for a store, ended up buying one in Benicia, California. And that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. So I did that for a while. That was, by the way, that ended up becoming the business that I committed suicide over and started looking into other businesses that I wanted to do. So I did a candle making business. I did a designer clothing business. I did equipment rental business. I did just a buffet of different kinds of businesses, including 3 information technology businesses. And my last IT business I sold we closed escrow December 31st, 1999. That business is still, by the way, operating. And I had 3 other businesses that were basically non-brick and mortar. We call them virtual businesses. And then I realized my expertise is in the business of doing business. And I kind of make a joke about it because I talk about it a lot, right? I'm fascinated with it. And I got that from my dad. When we would travel, he would look for an auto parts store he could go to and talk to the owner. And if he couldn't find an auto parts store, he'd go to a bar, have a drink, and talk to the bartender about what businesses were like in town. And, this was just his passion. And I realized that I had something to give. And I had been doing this research all my life on why businesses fail. So I just started consulting with businesses.
Right.
I mean, I was doing it when I had my business, right? And it was interesting how it started. How do you start consulting? Well, my third IT business was at a time, this started in 1990. I bought my first computer in 1950. So I've got 1973. So I've got 50 years of experience with computers. And they would come to us and say, we want to buy this technology. And I would say, why? And they'd say, well, because that's what everybody is in our industry.
Everybody else has it.
So how are you going to make money with it? Well, I don't know. I didn't even think about that. I just know that if we're going to be competitive, we got to do what our competitors
The Joneses are doing it.
Exactly. And I thought that's kind of stupid. So I felt like they were really throwing money down the drain. And I would say, I have some theories on how to invest in technology, which were valid then and are still valid today, even with all the changes that have taken place. And I would literally talk them out of spending money. And I would teach them how to evaluate the efficacy and the ROI and the ongoing costs, because most people don't even think about the ongoing costs of maintaining technology, like training every time you bring something new in. So I wanted my customers for life, and I wanted them to understand that my interest was their success. So I was consulting for free because we were selling them products and services. So when I stopped with the business, the consulting was just a natural.
Right.
And what I've been doing since then, since 2000, is sharing with people this insight that I've accumulated and packaged up in this book about why businesses fail. Not because I want them to know how to fail, but because the failure creeps up on you and you don't see it. It's like they talk about if you put a frog in boiling water, he'll jump out. If you put him in cold water and turn it on, he'll boil to death. He stays
there. Yep.
It's a slow process. So in the book, I talk about why it happens and I talk about how it happens and I show people how to see it coming.
Right. And as we said, plan for it and stop it from happening.
Actually, I would change those words a little bit if you don't mind. I would say it's about knowing that it's going to come. So if I know it's coming, I can watch for it. It's kind of like watching for the enemy coming over the hill.
Right.
So I tell them what's going to happen based on what's known as corporate life cycle theory and say, here's what's going to happen. Watch out for it. And here's how you build your organization or structure your organization so that it's durable and it can withstand the change. And then I show them how to deal with change so that it's not disruptive.
Right.
And that way they're prepared to deal with something that would otherwise have killed them.
Right.
And they can make intelligent decisions.
Right. You know, and one of the things that happens with businesses is that their downfall is their success.
Yes.
You know, and so talk to us a little bit more about that because they're growing, and then oops.
Yeah, there's a thing called the Peter Principle. And basically the Peter Principle is where an individual is promoted to their level of incompetence.
Right.
So, you know, I'm really good at this job, so I get promoted. And I'm really good at that job, so I get promoted. And then I'm not worth a damn at the next job because it's beyond my skill set. It's called the Peter Principle, right? Well, what happens with businesses is the opposite. The business becomes successful. And if you think about it in these terms, how hard is it to manage 30 customers? Okay, there's your baseline. Now let's multiply that by 10. Now you have 300 customers. Becomes a little bit more difficult, doesn't it? And if you multiply that by 10, now you got 3,000. You can't manage 3,000 customers successfully the way you manage 30. So the demands on staff change and the operational responsibilities of the business change. And those changes create needs that if the people don't know how to fulfill them, they fail. Right. So your success becomes your downfall. I've got a great story about this. A company that's very near and dear to me, and I'm not going to name company names because these are all very successful companies and they don't want people to know about the problems they suffer. But this was a company where had been incredibly successful and everything was going great. And they hit a point, it's a thing I call the arc of success. And they hit a point where the staff, it was about an $80 million company and about 425 employees, and corporate headquarters had about 50. And the hourly staff found themselves in a situation where they were no longer had the freedom to do things like buy supplies for themselves. There was rules. They put rules in place and said, we have to control this. We've gotten so big that we need to make
cannot go buy that pencil yourself.
Well, and it was really appropriate. It's not that it was inappropriate.
It was, to monitor costs, all sorts of things.
Well, to make sure the money was used wisely, et cetera, and help make sure that everybody had the supplies they needed. Besides these people, that wasn't their job to make sure they had supplies. They had other responsibilities. So they started rebelling. So I came in and I talked to the staff. There were 30 some odd people of these of the staff. They're called classified because they're hourly. And I said, congratulations. You should be so proud of yourself. Look at what you've done. You've brought us from where we were to where we are today. And now you're at a place where you feel like you have done your job and you want that freedom that you had before. Thank you very much for your service. Quit and go find another company.
Start again.
And they looked at me like, did he just tell us to quit our jobs?
Yeah.
And I explained to them the arc of success. It goes like this. When you get an idea and you try it and it's successful, it creates growth. When you have growth, that creates complexity. When you have complexity, that creates the need for controls.
Mm-hmm.
And when you implement controls, you end up with a loss of flexibility, the arc of success.
Right.
It's what happens. Either that or you fail and you die. And I said, look at the success you did. You built this company up to the point where these controls have become too onerous for you and you don't like them.
Right.
So either shut up and do your jobs or go find another company and help them do what you did for us. And they were like stunned.
Right.
Because they weren't expecting me to talk to them that way. And in a matter of 3 hours, the ringleaders went to the boss and said, we're sorry.
Yeah.
And it was over.
We were problem children. We're really sorry.
Well, but they realized, see, one of the things that I did was I gave them the kudos for being the fuel of the engine that made that organization successful. So I gave them something to be proud about, and then I gave them a new challenge.
Right.
Let's take it to the next level. And that's all anybody wants. A job that they can feel like they're actually accomplishing something, something good,
right,
and be recognized for it.
Right.
That's what people want. And that's all you have to do. And I don't care whether you're in the mailroom or whether you're the CEO, every single person in a business is critical to the execution of what that business does. You take any piece out, no matter where it is, no matter how highly compensated the position is, no matter how much authority or prestige, that there's a hole, there's a gap.
Right.
Those things have to be filled by people. So that's important for business owners and employees to understand.
Right.
And that's how success creates friction, and that friction creates problems.
Right.
And what makes it even worse is when you get to those points where success has created the friction, most of the time, leaders don't know what to do.
Right.
So they have to lean on what they've known. They have to lean on the experience they've had, not the expertise, not the knowledge, not the training, but the experience they've had, because, been there, done that. And when you don't have relevant experience, you try whatever you think will work the best, or you talk to somebody that you think will help you. And if you're lucky and it's right, and you can execute something that you don't have skills at, you'll survive.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to fail.
Right. Well, and, I've spent a good portion of my career in corporate communications. And, one of the things that we all have, discovered and know is that you need to tell people what's going on. If, say, you've been going merrily along and all of a sudden you're doing a new procurement process, you do have to request your pencils. You don't just go and buy them or whatever. Explain to the employees why. Just because if you don't, they will make it up. And what they will make up is probably something along the lines of they don't trust us anymore. And, and so it's just a simple matter of letting people know what's going on, good and bad. And because we don't like vacuums, right? And so if we don't have that information, like I said, we make it up. And our experience is that it's usually bad, and so what we make up is that it's bad, it really is just something that people don't think enough about, because like you said, they don't have that experience to know that, oh gosh, this is what we need to be doing. Or we all do the big assume. Well, we assume they know why we're doing this now, but they don't. And so it's just a matter of making sure people know what the heck is going on. And as you said, give them the kudos. Say, we have grown to the level where now we need to monitor our costs. And more importantly, you are doing such an important job. We don't want you taking your valuable time to be going and buying pencils, and so it's just kind of one of those things, just, keep people posted.
You said it very well. You want
we're a good team. We're a good team. So what about, you talk about planning for things. How do you plan for, say, a pandemic? And And unfortunately, we saw so many businesses fail. And clearly, that is a once in a lifetime type of thing. But how can you plan for something like that?
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up. I actually was able to include some information about natural disasters in general and the pandemic in particular in the book before it went to publishing. The very simple answer is that you have to understand your purpose and the value you deliver. If you don't understand those things, then you can't maintain the delivery of value to your market. If you can understand those things, all the pandemic does is change the delivery method. So, and this is in the book as well, I talk about this as a great example. I used to do a lot of options trading, and so I read Barron's, and there's a column in Barron's called, what's it called? I can't even remember the name. I only read it every week. But it's the options column. And I was reading it in the fall of 2020, right? When we were just ugly early stage pandemic. And if there's any company in the world that's going to suffer from not being able to bring large groups of people together, it's amusement parks and movie theaters, right? Disney was struggling.
Right.
Their sales were collapsing.
I mean, just think about that, folks. Disney was struggling.
Yeah. And this is in this, it's called the strike price. That column is called the strike price. Because that's what you do with options, right? You buy it based on the strike price. So the whole column was about how the Disney leadership turned that company on a dime and went from being sold short and their stock value collapsing to suddenly in 2021, they become one of the most successful, profitable stocks on the market, because they changed their delivery mechanism of their value. So they had leadership that understood that. Now, when I tell you what that is, you're going to go, oh, well, sure. Well, that was easy because they had all that. You missed the point. The point is they knew that they had a weak link. People say things like, you do not want to have one customer that's more than 50% of your revenue, right? So it's no different than that. They said, we have a weak link. These theme parks are massive generators of revenue for us. What do we do if that has a problem? We don't know what it would be, but it could have a problem. What would we do? I mean, think about this. What if you just had a weather emergency and you had to evacuate and it destroyed the town? Right? Same thing as the pandemic. You can't have anybody in the park, right? Now, what they ended up doing was pivoting to media, online media, streaming media. And that was the day that their primary source of revenue transitioned from their theme parks to their online streaming. So they knew their value and they figured out how to deliver it in a different way.
Yeah, because what they provide is entertainment.
Exactly. And it's the same thing with restaurants. Now, I do want to, here's a disclaimer, and this is very important. This is very important, Deb. When I went to do this research, in order to get a valid statistical sampling, I had to have a certain number of businesses that were a percentage of the group that I was studying. Trying to study every single business is impossible, particularly for one man. So I created a demographic that identified a particular subset of businesses. And the reason I'm saying this now is the key is, one of the 4 keys was no primary sources of revenue from retail activity. We call it B2C today, but I don't buy B2B or B2C, because if
people
you're a business,
buy from people.
If you're a business and you're buying from another business to use it, aren't you a consumer? So is that B2C or is that B2B? Because it's a business buying. So I don't buy that. So my research was not done based on retail organizations. Now, I have worked with retail organizations and brought my theory to them and helped them. It just hasn't been tested, and it wasn't built around that. This is all built around data. This is not Larry's, oh, I woke up and God put this idea in my head. Yeah. So you have to be able to understand the value you deliver, who it's valuable to, and how you're going to get it to them. And that's the first seed that you start building around when you build your business. And there's 8 layers. And you build that. And what I say to people is, if you build a building and you have a weak foundation, you can only build 1 or 2 stories.
Right.
If you build a really, really strong foundation, you can build as many stories as you want. So what I'm talking about is you build your business from the ground up with a very solid foundation. And there's 8 components, and that's the first one. And that's the reason all early stage businesses, I call them youth, fail. Right. Lack of clarity of purpose.
Right. Well, and it's also important that, and I'm going to pose the premise that each department, whatever you want to call it, in companies are also doing that. What are they providing to the people that support them? In another life, I worked on crisis planning. And, it was one of those things where we went into companies and we did a review of what they had. So their critical functions. And it was very interesting because we went to every department and we had, questionnaires, all those various things to fill out. If the head of your department gets hit by a bus, what happens? Can somebody else do the job? Where is that data? All of those various things. If nobody can get into work, what happens? All of those various things. And it was so interesting what we discovered, because we discovered that everybody just loved this. They thought this was the greatest thing in the world. One of the most critical functions was the mailroom, because if the checks coming in were not being gathered up and then sent to be deposited, nothing was going to take place. And so, of course, the mailroom just thought that was the greatest thing in the world. But, we also talked about, this was one of the companies we talked with was a big insurance company. And they, we went to the legal department, and you would assume that the legal people would say, oh, we are the most critical function. You cannot do without us, right? And they said, we're here to support everybody else. So that's our thing. And then one guy said, well, there is that report that we have to file with the State Insurance Commission on the last day of every month. And I said, and he said, well, if it doesn't get filed, the business ceases. And I went, oh, and so, just a lot of things like that. What do you internally do to support everybody else internally in the company?
Yeah, it stuff's fascinating to me. That's what I mean by I love the business of doing business. You're talking about basically what I call disaster recovery.
Right.
And one of the things I did recently, well, it was 15 years ago, but the California State Public Employee Retirement Systems, called CalPERS, had a data center. There are 3 data centers in California, 2 of them that are public and 1 of them that is private. It's for CalPERS, and they provide services to all state agencies and city agencies throughout the state. And they do investments of retirement funds, and they do insurance. So they're the insurance arbiter. So if like when you go to your doctor and he needs to get permission for a procedure, if you're covered under CalPERS, they go to CalPERS, not the insurer. So they actually manage all that stuff. So what happened was they realized that the data center had evolved, and the structure of it was no longer sufficient for an IT department. So they needed to transition it from a data center to an IT department, which may sound subtle, but it's a very different thing. And there were 2 groups, one that was doing the software and one that was doing the transition. They called it ETM, Enterprise Transition Management. So I was the lead consultant on that ETM piece, and it was $350 million of the $1 billion project. And all the equipment was changing. All the structure was changing. All the job descriptions of every employee was changing. And one of the things that we had to rebuild was disaster recovery, because the entire infrastructure had changed.
Right.
So we had to go and look at all of those key critical functions and what software they used and what people were involved and where is it going to live, and do we have conflicts of interest? Do we have problems with authority, where stuff needs to be confidential and it isn't, or vice versa? All of that stuff, there's that complexity that we're talking about. But if you understand what's going on in your business, you can build a foundation that's able to handle those changes. And of course, it requires an understanding of how to change management.
Right.
So that's just another skill. It's a skill like, like painting or cooking. It's just another skill that you can learn. But it's amazing to me how color by numbers this stuff is, because it really is color by numbers.
Right.
But so many people don't understand it or don't realize. They try to make it harder than it is.
Right. And it is, like you said, in many cases, really pretty simple. And sometimes it's a matter of, like we said, documenting, and having backups and knowing, okay, Betty does this and Bob does this, and, and of course, obviously, I think, many businesses discovered that during COVID. They didn't realize, oh, this is really what's going on. And those that adapted quickly are still here. And unfortunately, those that didn't, went the way of an extinct animal. Dodo bird. That was it. That was what I was trying to think
of.
The
dodo bird. Yeah.
But yeah, it was it. And folks, it really doesn't matter if you're a one person business or tens of thousands of employees. Many of this applies to you now, because let's be honest. If you're one person, do you want to stay a one person? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But, if you plan on growing in any way, these are things that you need to be thinking of. And, we talk a lot on the program about how one of the hardest things for especially a small business owner to do is to delegate. We're the only ones that can do it, and we're the only ones that can do it right. And all of those things. And of course, that is part of growing. And so then, of course, the big thing comes when you're doing this. And again, maybe you're going to whatever that next level is, and you're hiring. So talk to us about, the issues that companies have with hiring, because in your book, you really discuss that, job descriptions, are kind of a bugaboo. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple of things that I want to touch on, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. See, I kind of do the ramble thing and then expect you to.
Easy. This works. We're well positioned.
Like I said,
here.
we're a good team.
We're going to have fun. Yeah. So it's not an obligation for a business to sustain itself. If you want a business that's
they're
a
not
job,
supposed to just make money?
No, that's fine if they would sell what you care about. But if it's a business and all you're doing is you want a job for yourself, and that's what basically a business that isn't going to be sustainable is a job for yourself, that's okay. It's like people say, my kid doesn't have to go to college. There's no law that says you have to go to college. Lots of people make lots of money and never get a degree. There's a lot of people without high school degrees. It's about what's right for you. So, if you have a business that you want to sustain over time, beyond the tenure of leadership, you have to grow or you will die.
Right.
Period. There's no, I'll argue this with anybody under any circumstance and any condition. If you're not growing, you're dying. That's the first thing. So growth is a fact of sustainability. Secondly, you're absolutely right about hiring. How many times have you heard the old saying, hire people smarter than you?
Lots.
Okay, so if I'm hiring people smarter than me, then why am I afraid to let them do the work? Shouldn't they be able to do what I'm doing better than I'm doing?
That's why you hired them.
That's right. And I say that, I'm telling you, I say that to people, to CEOs, and they get this look on their face like, oh crap, did I forget to put my pants on this morning?
Right.
It's like you just exposed me. And it's so important to understand that. But you talked about hiring. There's a company that I stumbled across in 2010 or 11, I believe. And I can talk about this because it's nothing bad. It's called the Morningstar Company. It's not the credit rating agency for mutual funds. This is a tomato processing plant in Woodland, California. One of the most successful tomato processing plants in the world. And it's run by a guy who worked at 3 other plants in California and learned from the ground up and realized he figured out what he thought was the right way to do it. And he built a very flat organization. And what they do is they have, and it's an interesting dynamic because they have a very large number of permanent workers and a very large number of seasonal workers.
Right. Because tomatoes grow at a certain point in time.
Right. The workload changes. So what he designed was a thing called a CLOU, CLOU. And it's in the book. You'll get to it. Colleague Letter of Understanding. And what every employee in that company has to do is write their own CLOU. And what it says is, this is what I need from my colleagues to do my job. And this is what I'm going to do for my colleagues in my job to serve them. So they become accountable to the people they work with,
right?
The manager. So the jobs end up not being task-based, but being objective or goal-based. And a simple example is, don't tell me to empty the trash. Tell me to keep the office clean.
Right.
Okay, that's the difference between a task and an objective. So when you have clarity of purpose and you have a couple of other things I talk about in the book, you have the ability to go to the market and say, if you want to be part of doing something like this, then this is a group of people you want to be part of. So immediately you started by attracting them based upon an internal desire. Something that they want to do for themselves, but they know they need a group of like-minded people to do. So it creates a different level of commitment and concern in the business.
Right.
Now, let me give you another employee hiring story. And this is also in the book. One of my clients had an individual who had a support person that had worked for him for years, and this person had to retire. And they tried to hire a new person, and that person failed, and they complained about the person they were working for. This is kind of abusive, hard to please. They were concerned about sexual harassment.
Yikes.
And this person was one of their top money makers and one of the key people, and had been there for years and years. So they went through 8 employees in 18 months and called me in because they didn't want to fire him.
Right.
So they hired me to help him. And I said, I have to have the thread for his job has to be on my hand. The board had to approve it.
Right.
He and I sat down and started working, and I realized that the problem was not him, because if it had been him, how could he have had somebody stay there and be that loyal for so many years prior to that leaving? We ended up finding out that the HR department had a template that they used to recruit.
Oh, no.
And the personality and the characteristics of the person that he needed to be successful was the opposite of what they were recruiting. So HR did not want to change their policy because then they have to change it for anybody that wanted to, and they didn't want that added work. But think about this for a second. The key person who had the greatest liability potential and the greatest income potential was on the verge of being fired because the HR department, not that they're not valuable, but because they were insisting on not changing. Think about that for a second. So we took it to the board, and they were just stressed out. But ultimately, they said, okay, let's try, let's see. Happily ever after.
Right.
So all of this business about hiring, and we're taught people ghosting jobs and we can't find people. I'm going to tell you right now, throughout the last 5 years, pre-pandemic, pandemic, and post-pandemic, my clients are booming, and they're not suffering for employees. They are having turnover.
Right.
It has caused turnover. There's no doubt about that. But that It's going to happen no matter what. You can't control that any more than you can control a pandemic. But they've been prepared for it, and they know their value.
Right.
And when we recruit, we don't say, can you pick strawberries? We say, do you like strawberries? Do you like to grow things? Would you like to be outdoors? Do you enjoy working in the field? If you want to be part of our farming organization, we'd love to have you. And then the people that don't want to do that don't come. And the people that do say, wow, that's my job.
So you hire the right people.
And then you trust them.
Right. Right. And the problem with hiring to job descriptions is you're hiring to check the boxes, and like you said, I mean, sometimes those things were written years before by somebody totally different. I mean, that's the other thing is, you get hired for a job and you've got your little job description and you go in and they're like, and your boss says, well, you're going to do this, 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 and this. And you're like, but that's not on my job description. And of course, there's always that and other duties as assigned, right? That's the CYA for any job description. But, it's does it make it more complicated? Maybe initially, especially if you're having to redo things. But in the long run, the worst thing would be to hire 8 employees over 18 months that, with that constant churn,
it's so disruptive. Yeah. So let me give you another story. So, because I don't know how many of your businesses are smaller, but this stuff is very relevant to even the smallest businesses. So here's a small business with less than 20, let's just say less than 20 permanent employees. And actually, they might even have been around 10 at the time. But the general manager who reported to a board had been there for quite a few years and was heavily involved in politics, appropriately so, and retired. And the number 2 guy applied for the GM, the assistant applied, and he got hired. But the assistant was the tactical guy, right? But he was now moving into the role where he was, what he was filling was a position that had been political, but the need had gone away. So they had somebody else to fill in the tactical. What is he supposed to do?
Right.
So the board said, we don't even know what the last guy was doing. His job description's 25 years old and it was wrong when we hired him. So we have no idea what to tell you you're supposed to be doing. The board.
And he went,
this is a problem. So they hired me and we came in and we sat down and we talked about what is it that makes this company valuable and how do you deliver that value and what role do people play in it? And we got very clear about how things get done and we documented it.
Right.
And we created a very simple way to evaluate the GM's performance. And that GM today, that was 22 years ago. Today, it's a 150-year-old company. That GM has the 3rd longest tenure of any of the 25 GMs they've had over their existence. So again, they don't need me to help them with that anymore. Once I showed them how to do it, and now they do all of their employees that way. They talk about
it spreads out throughout the entire company.
What is it that we need in terms of value, and how do you deliver that value for us so we can deliver to our customers? And again, like I'm saying, it's just like paint by number stuff. It's not hard.
Right.
But you got to know. You got to know what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And sometimes you need to practice, right? And you need somebody who's been there and done that so they can mentor you and make sure that you don't steer into the wall, right? Avoid silly mistakes and end up being successful. So you can carry that learning on.
Right. And that's, of course, the trick a lot of times when a business is going to a next level. They might not have that person in there to provide that mentor or guidance or whatever it is. So when that's the case, what the heck do you do?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer you this way. It's a fabulous question. Why do startups seem to fail so much? Well, first of all, because there's more startups than anything else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just number-wise, it's going to happen.
They have no starting point that's a solid foundation. But let's just
sounded fun. Let's do it.
Yeah. So let's just say all of that's a given, but I still want to know why they fail so much. So I looked, rather than try to answer that, I said, what's the difference between the ones that fail and the ones that succeed?
Right.
And there's only one thing. the people that run the startups that succeed have either people who have started before and failed, so they've been through it, or they have people who have started and succeeded and they know what to do. So they bring in people who have experience.
Back to that word from the very start.
Exactly. So when you have that, what you do is you say, we're looking for someone who has experience with an organization that's transitioning from here to here.
Right.
These were our strengths. These are our weaknesses. We need someone who understands that, who's been through it, and who wants to be part of taking a company to the next level.
Right.
That's how you do that.
Right. Well, and the problem is that a lot of times what they do is they expect an employee that they already have to take on that role. They promote them to it or whatever. And like you said, they do not have that experience. They could get lucky. That right. does happen. But yeah, and I think we see that happen so many times where you have somebody that you promote into a position that they have absolutely no qualifications for. Right. And I think many times it's because companies think it's so beneficial to hire within. Or if we bring someone in from the outside, they won't be accepted. All of those various things. And, at some point, the decision has to be made. Do we want the business to be successful or not?
Yeah. What are we worried about? Are we worried about emotion and personality and feelings? So this is an interesting factoid for you and your audience. One of the most common areas of failure with that type of promotion is in business banking. Business bankers are commonly promoted to manage the team of business bankers, and it's almost always the most successful one. Yeah. And what you're doing is you're taking your best salesman from a sales role and putting him in a management role, and they fail more than any other type of promotion in any other industry. It is the most common example of that Peter principle.
Right. Well, and of course your sales drop because your most, your biggest producer, excuse me, you moved.
He's not producing anymore.
Yeah.
Or she.
And dealing, that's the other, and of course, one of the big things, and I talk about this a lot, is the fact that we do not give those people training. We're like, here, Larry, we're promoting you. Have a good time. Make it happen. Instead of saying, Larry, we're going to promote you. Now, here are the things that we're going to do to help you be successful and give you that training.
Yep, absolutely correct. It's not just training. It's training on the right stuff at the right time in a penalty-free environment. Yeah. I could talk for an hour about a penalty-free environment.
Yeah. Well, and we'll have you back. It's like when I was still in corporate America and I was promoted, I'd been the little worker bee, and then I was in charge. And I mean, like things like hiring, I had never done. I had no idea how to do that. I had no idea how to do budgets. I mean, not at a corporate level. I mean, all of these various things that are really, again, like you said, basic skills, paint by number. But, it wasn't something, and they did, well, Deb's a smart person. She should be able to pick this up. Now, Deb did. I mean, I am a smart person, but did I struggle? Did I not like it? Yeah. But unfortunately, what happens is a lot of times people are like, no, I don't want to do this, and I'm not going to. Put me back to be a worker bee. Can I be demoted?
Well, and I was telling you about how my father allowed me to do all these different things when I was young. Just imagine how valuable that was when I went out on my own and I was the boss.
Yeah.
My sister's a brilliant chemist, and she does work with cancer research drugs. And she got herself in a position where she was promoted to managing a team of people who were testing equipment that was used to evaluate the stuff they were doing.
Right.
And she hated it. She thought she would enjoy it, and she thought it would be good, and she thought she'd like the money, and she did it for less than a year, and she said, I don't like this.
Yeah. She wanted to have her hands in the chemicals, so to speak.
And the thing that pushed her over the edge, she said, I will quit if you don't give me my old job back. Mm-hmm. And here's what pushed her over the edge. She, and it's interesting because I was listening to another one of your podcasts mm-hmm. and somebody talked about this. All of her friends became her direct reports.
Oh yeah, that's a hard thing.
and she said, you know, I'd seen other of my friends mm-hmm. go through this promotional thing and mm-hmm. deal with it. And I've seen them suffer and mm-hmm. I've seen them both fail and mm-hmm. come out on the right end. But she said, wasn't willing to do that. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to try. Mm-hmm. So I was ready to walk away. Mm-hmm. So they gave her old job back.
Oh, good. Yeah, which meant they knew the value that she brought. And they were willing to admit that they screwed up. I mean, that's mm-hmm. the other thing is, you know, so many times they're like, well, no, we can't let anybody know we messed up. So here's your white box, pack your stuff up. Right. We see those white boxes and we're all like terrified. You know, and so, yeah, it's just kind of one of those things where the people in the company needs to admit this didn't work. You know what? We tried it, didn't work.
So I got another great story for you. And again, this is in the book. And I am 2 degrees of separation from this. So I believe it's true. Mm-hmm. I wasn't there, but I believe it's true. A high school girl in Bentonville, Arkansas, mm-hmm. was given a class project to go talk to a local businessman. This is in the book.
I did read it. Mm-hmm.
And find out what mm-hmm. they thought about their business. And because her father was best friends with one of the board members of Walmart, she was able to get an interview with Sam Walton, the founder mm-hmm. of Walmart. And he was not a recluse, but he avoided publicity.
And he is kind of a curmudgeon.
Very much so. So she went and interviewed him, and she mm-hmm. says, to what do you owe your great success? And he says, good decisions. And she says, well, how did you learn how to make good decisions? And he says, experience. And she says, well, I'm a high school girl. I don't have any job experience. How do I get experience? And he says, bad decisions. Mm-hmm. Now think about that. That's the CEO of one of the largest corporations on the face mm-hmm. of the earth mm-hmm. saying that mistakes are necessary mm-hmm. for success.
Right.
He's not saying they're okay. Uh-uh. He's saying you cannot be successful mm-hmm. without failing. Mm-hmm. Why would you be afraid of failing?
Right.
It's a sign. It's a sign of quality. Mm-hmm. It's a sign of intellect. Mm-hmm. It's a sign of a desire mm-hmm. to be better.
Mm-hmm. Right. And of course, the key is, what did you learn from that mistake?
Absolutely.
You know, and I mean, and like we were saying, I mean, you know, so many times they don't want to admit it. You know, I don't, and what they learned from it is don't do it again. You know, but and then that means that they're not going to try and grow. So maybe, you know, like in your sister's case, well, you know, we didn't hire the right person, so we're not going to hire again. Well, that's not going to work, right?
It's not going to work either.
And so, yeah, you take those mistakes and you learn from them, and then that frequently is off, you know, where you get the biggest gain. And I think so many companies are just terrified of that, and bosses, and, you know, even managers and people like that, because, oh my gosh, they did something wrong. And so then people feel, you know, they feel like, well, they're going to think less of me. And, you know, you know, it's been interesting. You know, one of the things that we talk about a lot on the program is, of course, Elon Musk and Twitter, or X, or whatever it's called this week. You know, you know, I think one of the big things, and of course, we only get what the media puts out there. So, you know, who knows, but he is not a big one for saying I screwed up. You know, he just keeps, you know, kind of blundering along. Now, you know, is he learning from it? Who knows? But you know, and when you have that much money and you're that smart, I mean, you know, but yeah, it's some of the best bosses I ever had, and even, you know, some of the best people that I work with now are the people who said, this didn't work. This is what we learned. Now here's what we're going to do.
Absolutely correct.
Well, oh my gosh, Larry, this has been so much fun. And like I said, we have to have you on again, because there's so many things. Like, one of the things we didn't talk about that I really wanted to delve into is, you know, that, you know, some of more of this stuff about why businesses fail, and the fact that many times a symptom is why we think something fails, and it's really not. There's a root problem that causes that symptom. And so we definitely have to have you on again, because there's just so many more things that we need to talk about. But until then, we talked about the book, and it is called Businesses Don't Fail, They Commit Suicide. Great book. It's a quick, fast read, folks. But
let's not forget the subtitle.
Yes.
How to Survive Your Success and Thrive in Good Times and Bad.
Yes. Because it is good times and bad. And so be sure to check that out. But how do people find you, and what are the services that you provide?
What I do is I help people survive success. Mm-hmm. When change comes and people are afraid to make a decision, mm-hmm. or realize they've made a bad decision and they need help, they call me, mm-hmm. and I help them. And the way you find me is, if you need to remember one of two things. If you can remember Businesses Don't Fail, that's the easiest. businessesdon'tfail.com. But the other way to find me is Mandelberg.biz. And Mandelberg can be hard to spell. But if you spell it wrong and you Google, I'm in there a lot. So you mm-hmm. should probably find me. Mm-hmm. But it's Mandelberg.biz or businessesdon'tfail.com. Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned at the very start, you're on LinkedIn, and so definitely connect with you there.
Absolutely.
Well, this really has been so fascinating. And we talk a lot on the program about how to start a business, all of the things, and we don't talk about how do we keep them from failing, and so this has been such a great program. And as I said, I can't wait to have you on again, because there's just so much more that we need to delve into. But, until that point in time, what are some final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to close off. There's a bunch of them, but there's the thing that I want to emphasize, which is what I almost emphasize every time, is that profit without purpose is pointless. The most important thing you can do, and I don't care how successful or how large or how young your business is, you must have clarity about your purpose. And there's 5 pieces to that. What is the value we deliver? Who do we deliver it to? How do we deliver it? What do we want to be when we grow up? And what kind of a culture do we want to have? Because if you don't have the right culture, you can't attract the people who want to work towards becoming what you want to be when you get older, right? What's our value? Who do we deliver it to? How do we deliver it? What do we want to be when we grow up? And what kind of a culture we want? That's purpose. And if you can't define that and put it in writing and use it to guide all of your decision making, right? Every decision you make should support in one way or another those points of purpose. Your business plan, your marketing plan, your strategic plan. Clarity of purpose is the number one reason early stage businesses fail. That's what your listeners need to take home with them today.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Such great wisdom. And like I said, I can't wait to chat with you again. But I'm Deb Creer. I've been having so much fun talking with Larry Mandelberg. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.